It's a sort of overly simplified perspective on like, well, you don't need a philosophy necessarily. Just be good. Just don't be a jerk. And that might be enough for some people. I talk a lot about omens in this little 6-minute video, but what I didn't say, and what I think is important to add, not everybody's going to have these type of reactions to sort of cultural narratives like omens. My critique of it is really just more about neurotic people. I said this the other day too, religion, it's clearly trying to be for everyone, but I think that there are certain personality types that need religion more than other people. And I think people who are high in neuroticism, high in openness, disagreeable, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but I feel like those are the type of people that really need religion more than maybe your average person might. But I'm really trying to address modern people. So, there's a real trend in modern culture. They believe in omens. They're not really thinking too deeply about it. They believe in karma. They believe in a lot of these things. And, they're modern Western people. They don't have any understanding of omens or how to tell. They just kind of like, it's kind of reminds me of something that I think it was Carl Jung. I appreciate a lot of his approaches to a lot of this stuff. And one of the things I think he said was that if you wake up to spirituality and you want to pursue a religion, pursue the one that you grew up with, or the one that's closest to you in terms of like the one you know most about, maybe. Because this is complicated stuff, man. And like, in terms of like a belief system that works, that can help keep you afloat when things are difficult. And again, we're not talking about the institutions, the churches. You can tell the 6-year-old Garden of Eden story, and then when they're 12, they might have some questions. Were Adam and Eve really the first people? Or why is the snake talking? And then if you're well versed, I guess, in the metaphorical sort of threads that run through the Bible, then you can be the one that is like, you gave them the 6-year-old's version, but it's not very sophisticated. But when they're 12, they're going to be hungry for something, maybe. Kids will self-identify as like the ones who need more instruction just by having the question. And how we raise kids is like, they tell you when they're ready for the next lesson. But it's up to you to be able to be like adept enough and knowledgeable enough. And I guess the adept part is like, sometimes you're going to have a tough student. Kids are so wildly different from each other. There's so many different elements. There's all sorts of variables involved. Not all these kids are going to be like interested in getting the deeper message of the Garden of Eden story, or what is the deeper story of Jesus's crucifixion. Different kids will have different types of questions, but you have to be watching for these things, And I have often wondered if in the Garden of Eden story, things are kind of normal. There's nothing normal about the Garden of Eden story, but you can identify like a man and a woman in a garden, and then there's like God, who's maybe a parental like figure. But once the snake starts talking, that's a little weird, and I do wonder if that's like intentional in terms of trying to identify kids who are going to question things more. They might need a deeper explanation than some other kids. I feel like that's kind of where religion has failed modern people, is that to the people who did have deeper questions, they were just told to shut up. It's like you go to your priest or your pastor or, a adult around you, and you say, well, wait a minute, like, how could Adam and Eve been the first people, but then they had, their kids married other people? Like, what's that about? And if you just tell them, well, just have faith and just shut up, stop asking so many questions, what do you think's going to happen? They're out, And it really turns so many people off of religion, the fact that they don't get the, because to me, though, there's a 6-year-old's version of the Bible. There's a 12-year-old's version of the Bible, And then there's like a 19, 20-year-old's version of the Bible. I guess there's like a ratio to like the person's suffering, their intellect and their desire to understand these things, and then their ability to like act and follow through and have some kind of discipline. But if they just decide that you're full of crap, then you've lost them. Nothing has turned more people off of religion than religion itself. It's a big problem. That's why I started allowing myself. I had to allow myself to gravitate towards Christianity because I had developed such a hatred, maybe, for it. I had developed such a distaste for all religion. I felt like it was being forced on me. I kind of resented the religious nature of like so many people around me, and even the fact that it said in God we trust on our money was obnoxious to me. I was too uptight, too serious about it. Like I really thought religion had ruined the world. So is my reality objective or relative? To me, there is an objective world and there is an objective morality. And, I could spend weeks trying to argue for that. I'm down to entertain like counter arguments, outside of a human context, because that is maybe a good point, I guess. Like, do cheetahs have morals? Like, morality is a human issue. Yeah, I mean, I guess back in the day, I had a more relative morality. Do as thou wilt, That was sort of my attitude. I wouldn't have articulated it that way, but do what you want as long as you're not hurting other people. It never occurred to me that just living without certain types of discipline could, over time, really damage you. And I guess that was my thing, was like, I had such a terrible relationship with my inner thoughts. And I think a lot of people that suffer from depression and anxiety and all these things, like that's kind of the main thing that they're going through, is that they have a terrible relationship with their thoughts. That changed for me like overnight. So that's not a normal occurrence. It's pretty weird. It's more normal than I thought, but it's still,